call the meeting to order as of now.
All right, so item 1A, administer oaths of office to newly reappointed members. That's you, Mr. Chair. So if you will raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, George Mason,
I, George Mason,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
as a member of the Historic Preservation Board
as a member of the Preservation Board
for the city of Denison, Texas,
for the state of Texas,
and will to the best of my ability
and will to the best of my ability
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States and of this state.
of the United States and of this state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. There you go. There's your pen. All right. Happy New Year to everyone. Happy New Year. Hope you had a safe one. Citizens may speak on items listed on the agenda. A request to speak card should be completed and returned to the city clerk or board secretary upon arrival, prior to the board reaching the public comments section of the agenda. Citizen comments are limited to 3 minutes unless otherwise required by law. Comments related to the public hearings listed below, if any, will be heard when the specific hearing starts. Before we go any further, item 3C has been pulled from the agenda and may be heard at a later date. So item A, receive a report, hold a discussion, and take action on the December 21st, 2021 meeting minutes. Comments?
Board Member Solomon had noted that one of the motions was incorrect. We got someone's name, the wrong name in there. So what we can do, if you'd like, we can make that note and we can still approve the minutes with that edit made, if you'd like to.
All right. I would entertain a motion.
I wasn't here. Make a motion.
Kirsten, you'll make
I
the
wasn't
motion?
here, so I can't move.
Yeah, make a motion. I make a motion that we approve the minutes
With the change?
with the change.
Do I have a second? You have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. I'm sorry.
Those opposed, say same. There being none, then the motion is carried. Moving on, receive a report, hold a discussion, and take action on a request to add a mural to the side facade at 430 West Cheslan. Case number 2022-001H. Donna?
Okay, when Chair Mason and I discussed this, it was obvious that we have policies and procedures for public art, and some of you might not be familiar with those, and so that it would be a good idea to review those. I have given you a handout. It's 4 pages that is a quick summary of it that we can go over very quickly, and 3 pages maybe. And then the rest of it is the actual, what the council approved, the public art policy. And so hopefully this is just the Cliff Notes version and what's applicable to the Historic Preservation Commission today. As you see at the top, the public art approval process, it has murals and sculptures and other. So if there's really separate processes for them. However, it's all in one. It's the same process. It comes before you and it comes before the design committee of the Main Street Advisory, well, the Main Street group. So the process starts with the completed certificate of appropriateness application, which is what comes before you on all the cases. So that's what initiates it, and then we get more information. You'll see, and it's a dual approval. It is approved by the design committee and by this board. I thought that it didn't matter which one approves it first, and the design committee has not had time to review this yet because of the way the meetings fell. And so it indicates in here that normally they would get it first, but that's not always been the case. I'm told the previous historic preservation officer would approve it pending approval by the design committee on occasion. So I think it's just important that we make sure that both groups are in agreement and approve it. And one thing, I listed 4 things there at the bottom. There's no painting unpainted brick. That's our policy. It doesn't state about variances. Content must be family friendly, and it must have general overall appeal. The artist portfolio must be approved. That's really technical skills and experience. That's something that I feel like the design committee does, and the artist that's being presented today has been pre-qualified. They've done work previously in downtown and meet all the qualifications that are listed.
So, Donna, I'm going to ask the audience, but once those 2 approvals are given by both us as well as the design committee, that still goes to the council for approval, correct?
No, it doesn't. This is the final approval process.
So when is the certificate of appropriateness issued?
After both of those have been granted.
Okay, so it won't be until after the design committee sees this?
Correct.
Okay.
And so that would be, in this case, up to me to make sure that all the paperwork's in place.
Right.
But it would, we'll fill out the paperwork today, but it will not be given to the applicant until the design committee has reviewed it. And they meet next week.
Who is the design committee?
Currently, we've had some members that are no longer serving on that. So Mary Karam, Don Bamman, Wendy Acosta, and let's see, are there others? That's the ones that are currently serving on it. We had three members that have not renewed, so we're looking for others as well.
I take that you're an ad hoc member of that committee.
Yes, and those members are long-serving.
And am I signing the certificate of appropriateness, or is that something you do?
It's difficult for me to tell. When I was in this role before, both myself and the chair signed it. It has, I can't tell that had been done in recent years. And so I think the practice that we have been going by was for both of us to sign the certificate of appropriateness.
Once the design committee meets and
Right.
okay.
So this fits in the overall, I'm kind of starting a bit from, but in the past I've seen where a recommendation by you or Bill in the past was made. And unless I'm overlooking, I'm not seeing that anymore. And in the case of this, would you provide a recommendation to us of what you think we should do? Or do you not do that anymore?
I will give you my input on the and the background story, and No, we took that part off of the agenda so we can discuss how that moves forward in the future, but it was taken off of the agenda.
And the only reason I say that is with this, there's a lot of I's and a lot of T's. You know, when we get a packet 2 days before, then,
Right.
and that's not a complaint by any means.
Right.
It's just a point of discussion.
Well, there were originally 2 cases on this, and a lot of information that could have accompanied it that didn't. Like, for instance, these guidelines, and so that's just something that's going to take a little while probably to get, hopefully not too long, but to get a feel. Everything's not exactly the same as it was when I was in this role before, and it's more formal, and so we have more policies and procedures like this public art policy, which I was involved in putting together. Actually, the design committee was the leader in putting this together, and it was approved by council. So, things that I just missed, we will get better on putting the information in the packet. And so please feel free. Like, Chair Mason contacted me and said, what's our policy for this? And asked me if I would kind of present what your responsibility is. Mm-hmm. And so I said, of course, and I spent quite a while this morning on that to try to familiarize myself. Again, I helped with the creation of it, but it's been a little while, and there's
Understood.
so I appreciate the contact and the questions for things that I haven't thought of in explaining. So we'll get better at it, but until then, please feel free to ask the questions.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, that's your responsibility.
Thank you.
Okay, on the second page, I think it's easy to read. Content must be family friendly, have general overall appeal, no nudity, profanity, racial profiling, sexual innuendos. Must reflect the character, culture, and history of the area. And from what I could gather during my study this morning, that's the main responsibility that you would be considering. All the other things should be obvious, like they should have already been approved as an artist when it comes to you. And we should already have the paperwork and things like that. So it's just that character, culture, and history of the area. Does it fit in there? Must have appropriate thematic content for the environment. It must have an appropriateness of scale. I think that's something else that the design committee will weigh in on, but you will have some judgment of that as well. And then it talks about no advertising. And then in planning and consideration, this is something that I feel like the design committee is more concerned with, these check boxes. The previous agreed upon design and cost, a written contract, and the art should be expected to last for 5 years. In a lot of these cases, the Denison Arts Council has been and likely will be a funder of these, and so they had interest in the creation of this document as well.
So Donna, I'm asking a lot of questions. I apologize. I'm learning.
That's okay.
These criteria, are there specific criteria that we are responsible to look at, such as that it must reflect characters and culture, or is are there different criteria for each of the bodies?
I feel like there are, and I tried to differentiate this morning what who did and started out by doing that. And so it's just going to be a process. This is a new process. We've not had a lot of murals, and it's just going to be a process where we figure that out. But I feel like, we'll go on the next page, we'll go over the specific rules. And I feel like the paperwork part, the design committee and myself can make sure that that paperwork's in order. There's some things like make sure that the safety of the artist is ensured. Well, I feel like that's, in the past, specifically, history, the design committee has been more concerned with that and has put that on their checklist. So there can be some discussion on who does what, but we just need to make sure that it is done by one group or the other. And so I'm not answering the question because I don't have a specific answer, but I think it may be a little bit more obvious, and when we get to the end of this, you may be able to help me answer that question a little bit better.
Looking at that first sheet you put together, Donna, item 1, I think, is what relates more to this board than the rest of the document. That is the theme and the design.
Right.
So that seems to be what our focus should be centered on.
Is it appropriate for the downtown district? Is it appropriate for the environment, just like any other historic preservation item would be? So I feel like if we stay with that, with this group, that's probably appropriate. But again, there may be some overlapping things. Like you want to make sure the content is okay. Well, of course, they're going to make sure the content is okay as well. So I didn't see any, we do this, y'all do this, other than it's just appropriate for you to weigh in on the appropriateness for the district and the appropriateness for the public. On the mural specifics there, on number 3, it says choose appropriate wall and location. Protecting building's integrity is of utmost importance. So I think that is a consideration that you would have, the integrity of the building. The painting unpainted surface is one of your responsibilities. The next one, the minimum property standards, is for your information, because when we were putting this together, a lot of people question, well, how will we make sure that it's maintained? Well, it's really going to come back to that minimum property standards is going to be our fail-safe on making sure that it's maintained. And then we already talked about the public, the safety. Okay, so on the final page, there's 7 things that are on the checklist that have been accumulated.
Let's go back.
Okay.
The last point on the page. Have plan for ensuring safety of the painters and the public. So that's going to be a responsibility that we make that decision?
It's been a concern of the design committee in the past. And so I feel like that's a good place for it. So I feel like you should say the design is okay or not, and they should worry about the mechanics of getting it done. So as an example, this one is not going to be as big of a concern because of the logistics. But on the Eisenhower Leadership Mural that's on Austin Avenue, there's a rather narrow sidewalk there. And so the design committee was specifically concerned with the safety of the artist and how wide the lift was, or the lift that went down the sidewalk. Did it have enough space to traverse? did they have enough room to maneuver? So there were things like that that they were concerned with, that they wanted to make sure the artist was comfortable with and aware of, and how that was going to transpire.
Who took that responsibility in the past to make sure that happened?
That's where I'm going.
We never saw it.
We, previous to this public art policy, we didn't really have a policy. I'm not sure, some of the murals that were painted, I feel like, were painted before historic preservation, and then some probably just went through historic preservation. And so I'm not aware of any roles and responsibilities of anybody.
Ensuring the safety of the people doing the work and people around the area where it's being worked on, is that our responsibility, or is that the design committee, or is that someone else's?
I don't feel like it's your responsibility to do that. The building department has specific policies that we've worked with them, downtown specific, because you can't just block a sidewalk. So let's say it's on Main Street. We want to make sure that it's open for public traffic, but nobody can walk under it and get paint
Yeah,
dropped on
yeah,
their
yeah.
head or a paintbrush or
So
anything that could hurt
there
them.
is, and Donna, once again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I want to make sure that,
Right.
quite frankly, that we don't become responsible for a decision that's made where somebody's hurt from scaffolding collapsing. Are they gonna have to go get a permit to put up scaffolding and do whatever's necessary, or hire a crane to come out and, is the city gonna be involved in that with where George is going with that decision? Because I can't make that decision.
I don't want to make that decision.
That's really a question I can't answer, because
Okay, that's
normally when you paint, you don't have to have a building permit for it. Now, if you're gonna paint and do repair, you have to have a building permit. So you would go through a process, and they would make sure that you had, that you're registered as a contractor and things like that.
But if you're gonna put scaffolding, I don't know the answer to this question, by the way, before I ask you, I think you know where I'm going. If you're gonna put scaffolding, or you're gonna hire a crane, whether you're gonna paint the outside of your building or put a new whatever, don't you have to have a permit to do so?
Not for painting. That's my understanding.
I think it might, my own opinion is that it might be appropriate for them to require a permit to do that.
Yeah, we can definitely make that comment, recommendation. So for this, I don't feel like that responsibility falls on you.
Okay.
I think the council has just said that must be done, and in the past, the design committee has paid attention to safety. So I don't think they've gone out and inspected the lift that was rented or anything like that. It's just they asked questions that made sure that the artist had paid attention to the safety measures. So, those are very good questions. We've just not gone through that path before that
Well, maybe
I'm aware of.
Maybe you're right. Maybe this dialogue is gonna get us closer to being able to not.
Right. Right.
Fair enough.
And in the past also, we've had some murals that weren't as a big safety concern, like the Eisenhower mural was next to Austin Avenue. That, with all the traffic going through,
Yeah.
was a little bit more, and we hadn't really thought about that either. And I will mention that these policies were taken from several others that have a lot of this type of activity. I don't remember specifically, but like Georgetown and cities that have a lot of public art. So we, they had a lot of experience from which that we base this on.
But in that subject, I would require a permit. If you're gonna put scaffolding up or put a lift on the Main Street,
Yeah.
anyway,
That's something we will visit with the building department about. Okay. Number 2, it's talking about a permission from the property owner. Number 3, artistic quality shall be conveyed. I really think both the design committee and you guys will be paying attention to number 3. You want to make sure that the artist, and one of the words that we use in the application is that emerging artists are not who we want painting murals in our downtown. So we are all supportive of emerging artists. We have dumpsters and other projects that they can do, but we want people that have experience with large-scale projects, and that's why we require at least 6, images of their previous work. Okay, the context, architecture, geographic, socio-cultural, historic setting, and then the feasibility of the project. Again, that's something that the Denison Arts Council was interested in, to make sure that they can actually complete this project, that it won't be a half-painted mural. And then originality and unique expression. Permanence of the project must be demonstrated, high-quality materials and things like that. So that would be something that I think the design committee would be more concerned with, the mechanics of it. I think it's the visual representation that this group would be responsible for.
Okay, thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Donna.
All right, do we have someone that wants to speak to us?
I don't think the applicant is here for this. I will tell you that it's part of on 430 West Chestnut, is part of an application that has been reviewed by you guys before in different stages. And so when council reviewed it for the paint color, they just felt like the paint was too prominent. And so different stages, I think at your last meeting you had one that the front of it, they were going to be doing the rock at the front. This is part 2 of that, to try to, get some softening to the color. Let's see.
Any comments or questions from board members?
I'll ask the obvious again. Wait, Donna, I'm challenging today, aren't I? These bricks are not painted.
The what now?
The bricks are not painted, correct?
So this is,
Mural, it is. It's painted and stucco.
Okay.
yeah. This is just for that side only. Kind of where the sign says salon and it changes colors. Just that west side of it is what we're considering. So it's stucco.
Any other comments, questions? Can I have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the painting of the mural at 430 West Chestnut. Is that the right address?
Can I have a second?
I said that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? There being none, then the motion's carried. So now this goes on, does council review this? It goes on to the design committee?
It's-
and-
Yes. Then it will be approved pending. And theirs is, they're not reviewing the design. They're reviewing, again, the mechanics of it to make sure that the artist is pre-approved, which I have signed off on that because they've done other work and have previously gone through that process. And, making sure that we have all the paperwork and the safety and things like that.
So do they have a formal meeting?
Do they have what?
Do the design committee, do they have a formal, where they meet formally to discuss it, or?
They meet just like the Economic Vitality Committee does. So it's a more informal meeting, but we've been working through that process too, to try to make sure that it is more formalized of a process where they actually sign off on something. And that was a challenge because they haven't, through COVID, they haven't always met in person.
I see.
And so we're trying to work toward where they would either pass something around where they sign off on it personally to make sure that it's not, just me saying that it was done, that it's, that we've got documentation. So, but their meeting is not posted like this one. So this, this is your responsibility for the public visibility portion of it.
All right, thank you, Donna. Moving along, item number 4, staff updates, receive a report, and hold a discussion regarding staff updates. Is there anything to present?
Let's just call the public art approval process your update. You might want to put that in your binder in case we have another, we won't have to go through that again.
Thank you for doing that, Donna. It's awesome.
All right.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that we have on the record that we're going to address the hazard, the liability issues with painting murals. That should not be a responsibility of the historic committee.
So Greg? I turned around after we had that discussion and I noticed
Size there.
No, it's okay.
So what I just wanted to mention to you while they're here, there's safety mentioned in our public art process, approval process. So like when a muralist is painting like on Austin Avenue.
Right.
And so they were questioning who signs off on the safety of it and the, from the building department. Normally you would have a building permit.
Right.
Well, we don't have that with just
For painting,
painting.
yeah.
And so they were curious about that, and I said we would have a discussion. So I just wanted to introduce you to the conversation,
So-
and if you had any.
Yeah, so staff can if there is no existing permit, staff can create a permit process. So we would just need to identify some parameters as to whether we keep it with the district or whether we just put it citywide, but we can address a permitting process. Because without it, really, there is going to be a lack of any kind of enforcement. There's nothing, there's no mechanism by which to do that.
Well, and you'll have to forgive me, sometimes I'm being accused of being risk adverse, but the concern for my part is if I approve, based on what I'm reading here, that I accept liability if someone fell off the scaffolding, and they could come after me personally or this board.
Well, and
That's the way I read this.
Right, and I haven't read it, but I would say that that's a possibility. I mean, if there's a
Well, I don't want it to be a possibility.
well, if there's a transfer of if there's not a clear transfer or a clear direction where the responsibility is, then if we're talking risk aversion, if somebody does fall or something happens, then they're going to read the same thing you're reading, and if they see that there might be, it's going to generate a lawsuit, and you will be named, I would imagine. I mean, that's the way the lawsuit works. If we create the permitting process, it just takes all that away. It'll remove,
Exactly.
right, it'll remove all of that.
I think the primary responsibility is going to fall on the owner of the property that's being worked on.
It is.
So,
It is.
Theoretically, it
so-
doesn't.
No, it's, I would not disagree with that at all. If something happens at my house and my loft and I don't, have a permit and I've got insurance, and so they're gonna try to leverage that insurance. But it does not it does not preempt them from listing anybody else that they might think have some liability, right? So if you want to avoid that, which I think would be prudent, we just need to create a permitting process. And then that clearly defines the fact that they needed to have this permit process before they did that.
Yeah.
And then it clears that up.
And I'm not sure that we're taking on a personal responsibility.
No,
We're acting as agents of the city.
Yes,
so
you are.
Ultimately, the city's responsible.
yes.
Well, and I somewhat agree with that, George. Yeah, so the words are, have plan for ensuring safety and painters and public safety. So if we could do the direction you're going and require a permit if you're gonna hire a lift.
So if they were coming before you that require a plan, they would bring
what our responsibilities are.
yeah, if there was a permitting process, they would bring their approved permit
Correct.
to you and go, here's my approved permit, and now I'm asking for whatever I'm asking for.
How are we going to determine when and if they need a permit?
Well, that would be something that staff would have to discuss, and we'd have to figure out, if he's gonna paint a windowsill, we probably don't really need to go all crazy on a permitting process, but if he's got a mural project, that's gonna take an amount of time, and that sidewalk's gonna be obstructed possibly, things are gonna be for an amount of time, then it probably needs to be addressed in a permitting process.
So we probably need to ask if there's been a permit issued for the project.
Well, I think once we get one in place, that would be,
Yeah.
yeah. There are things activities that they could take part in that would touch some of our building codes, not necessarily painting codes, but other codes. But I don't know standing in front of you right now, exactly a large mural project, exactly what it would touch and if it would cover what we're trying to cover. But that being said, we can look at that obviously and cover that up with a permitting process, and then I think that alleviates, it brings a lot of clarity to what you guys are trying to do right now.
Very good.
Does that help out?
Yeah, and we've got it on record, so I'm good.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd.
You bet, no problem.
Yeah, I think the lift is the one thing that would trigger it, and then, public obstruction of the sidewalk is a concern. It's not as much safety, but, so, yeah, but we can have discussion about that. So now he's introduced to it, so.
All right, anything else? Then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.